Just before we get into this video, guys, if you want to follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, the links are here. And if you also want to support me on Patreon as well and help out my channel, that would be absolutely awesome as well. But let's get on with the video. Hey guys, it is Wingy here and welcome to a brand new video, because I always say this, and what if you've seen it before and what if it's an old video, I don't know, but hello. Do you know what, it's one of them days where I'm pissing myself off. Anyway, the point of today's video is to talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe trilogies. I think the MCU has got like 18, 19 movies in it now, which is mental. For the past 10 years, Marvel has been giving us just some incredible movies. Some pretty crap ones, but overall, a very, very good pool of movies. And within that, we've ended up with some trilogies, 4 to be precise. Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and the Avengers all now have 3 movies in their respective franchises. What I'm going to be doing today is putting a case forward for each one of them, telling you what I think of each of them, but I'm not going to say which one I personally prefer. I'm just going to leave it to you guys in the comments and we're going to have a vote on it, just because I want to see other people's opinions on this. Now, I must be clear as well, because I don't want to ruin anything for anybody. When I talk about the Avengers, I will be talking about Infinity War, so if you have not seen it, I will probably reveal some spoilers, and I mean all the other movies that I'm going to talk about as well. So you've had your warning now. I have warned you that I will be talking in spoilers about Infinity War as well as all the other movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But anyway, let's get into it. Starting off though with the trilogy that started 10 years ago and ended 5 years ago. Fuck. The Iron Man Trilogy. Now, if it wasn't for Iron Man, and if that movie wasn't a success, we probably wouldn't have the MCU as we know it now. Or at all, probably. Iron Man is a great story of a hero who starts off as practically a really insufferable douchebag. He sells weapons, he's an alcoholic, he's a womanizer, he doesn't give a shit about anybody except himself. Then he gets kidnapped, he gets tortured, and he has to find a way to escape, and he does this by building a suit of armor. He gets home, he wants to stop making weapons now, and he tidies up that armor a bit and he becomes Iron Man. I mean, my god, at the time we just mustn't have realized how impactful that movie actually was. I mean, it gave us arguably one of the most iconic portrayals of a superhero that we have ever seen on the big screen. Robert Downey Jr. just nails it. This movie is solid. It really, really is. It is a strong 8 out of 10 for me. It's got great action sequences. I love the journey and the development of Tony Stark. And it has a pretty decent villain as well. People often moan about the MCU, and I think Obadiah Stane gets overlooked. It also sets up numerous things. I mean, you get Agent Coulson in there. Obviously, you've got War Machine in there. Nick Fury appears at the end. So it's great. It does tie into a bigger universe, but it doesn't overshadow the movie. Something that I don't think Iron Man 2 does. Iron Man 2 does a similar sort of thing where it sets up future things, but it becomes so overbearing at times. There's a whole section where you have Nick Fury talking to Tony Stark basically about will he or won't he join the Avengers. You have Coulson back. It introduces us to Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, and this movie is definitely not as bad as people seem to make it out to be. There's definitely some standout moments. The fight at the end with War Machine and Whiplash, that's cool. The scene on the racetrack, that is fucking awesome. But overall, this movie is a bit bogged down and it does suffer from second movie syndrome. Then we move into Iron Man 3. Now, this is probably the most controversial movie in the MCU to date. Thing is though, I do really like Iron Man 3. I even like the twist. The only frustrating thing about the twist is the fact that Ben Kingsley actually nailed it as the Mandarin, and I really wanted him to keep that up, you know, but obviously he doesn't, and he becomes Trevor, an actor, and it was just all pretend. I understand the criticism why people don't like that. I mean, if I was watching a Spider-Man movie and they did that with Venom, or they did that with the Joker in a Batman movie, I'd be fucking pissed. But considering I'm not a massive fan of Iron Man from the comic books, then it didn't really bother me that much. In fact, I enjoyed it. However, the villain that he's replaced with is actually quite crap. His motivations aren't that good, and it kind of frustrates me that for a lot of this movie Tony Stark isn't in the armor in terms of when the armor's about, you know, it's just the armor, Tony Stark somewhere else. Even though these suits of armor seem like they were really strong and could withstand a lot of stuff, they're torn through like tissue paper in this movie. But what I do like about it is that the humor really lands well, and I love that it's a personal story for Tony Stark. After the events of the Avengers, he practically has PTSD. Seeing how being a superhero can affect you as a person, not just physically but mentally, is really interesting, and I think this movie handled it really well. So the Iron Man trilogy, whilst definitely starting off strong, does dip in the middle, does pick up again at the end, but I don't think it picked up the heights from Iron Man 1. But that's just what I think. Let me know if it's your favourite in the comments. Then the second trilogy that we will get starts with Thor. Now the thing is with the Thor movies overall, I find them quite dull. Not all of them, we'll get to the third one. But the first Thor movie, it really is just a fun ride, but incredibly forgettable. Again, it does a similar thing to Iron Man 3 in the sense that you see the heroes stripped back and they don't have their powers, they're not in control. Thor loses his hammer and he has to earn it back. And whilst it definitely offers some really comedic moments, Thor as a character just wasn't that interesting in this first movie. However, I do appreciate that obviously Thor's world in the comics is very mad and over the top. I appreciate how Marvel tried to really ground it and explain it as real science. Not flawlessly, but good enough. The end action sequence as well with what's he called, the Destroyer, but Loki's really good, and obviously it does set up parts of the Avengers, but not as much as Iron Man 2 did, so I do appreciate that. Then you get the sequel, Thor the Dark World. Things are floating about, Doctor Who's an elf villain, it's shit. Next, Thor Ragnarok then is just brilliant. I've got to admit though, when I first watched it, I was quite lukewarm on it, in the sense that it's very funny, and seeing Thor in a very funny movie and a very comedic movie is not something that we'd really seen too much of before. And I do stand by the fact that whilst the humour definitely lands and definitely works about 90% of the time, there are some moments in this movie where someone says a joke or someone makes a quip and it just doesn't work. It's just not right for that moment, and sometimes the humour can detract from the overall film. However, visually this movie is stunning. And like I say, with the humour, you can just feel Taika Waititi's personality just woven throughout it. Hela as a villain, really good. Slightly underused, but I still really enjoy her. I also appreciate the Doctor Strange cameo. I love seeing Thor with all that lightning. That's fucking awesome. Also, the Hulk. The scenes with the Hulk are just so good. They have an epic showdown, of course, and then seeing them interact throughout the rest of the movie, and seeing Thor interact with both Bruce Banner and the Hulk and saying like, no, you're my favourite. That sort of stuff. It's so funny. The dynamic that those two have is just brilliant, and I look forward to seeing a lot more of it in the future. So overall then, a solid, brilliant end. However, the first two are quite crap and a bit forgettable for me. But let me know if the Thor trilogy is your favourite trilogy. Then the third trilogy that came, the Captain America trilogy. I've got to admit, Captain America the First Avenger is, I don't know, it's a fairly average movie again. In terms of developing the character of Captain America, it does an incredibly good job. When he's all small and thin and skinny and, well, like me a bit, he's the exact same person that he goes on to be when he's all big and muscular. Not like me. The only problem that I have with this movie is the fact that Red Skull really isn't utilised. The story itself is a bit boring. The action, whilst good in places, overall is a bit meh. And to be honest, it does come across as like a 2-hour trailer for the Avengers. I mean, there's so much stuff that is set up in this that will later go on into further movies. So whilst it's fun, it's just alright. Then we get to the second movie in the Cap trilogy, which is The Winter Soldier. Oh my god, I fucking love this thing. It's a really good political thriller, very reminiscent of some of the movies that you would get in the 70s. It definitely has one of the more intriguing stories out of any of these MCU movies. The fact that Hydra have infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. and have done since the Second World War was really cool and handled incredibly well. Obviously there are plot holes raised in terms of, well, hang on, how come Tony Stark didn't detect that in the Avengers? But whatever, just enjoy it. The hand-to-hand combat in this movie is freaking awesome as well. I like seeing more of Natasha Romanoff, especially with Steve Rogers. Seeing their relationship grow is really cool, and it introduces us to Falcon, who is obviously a bit part player really, but he's one of my favourite MCU characters, especially with the chemistry that he has with Steve Rogers. It's a thrill ride from start to finish. The only gripe that I really have with Winter Soldier is the fact that they kill off Nick Fury and then just pretty much bring him back straight away. It did sort of basically confirm the trend that Marvel just kill people off and just bring them back, and death is kind of irrelevant. But apart from that, it's great. The action's incredible and the story's incredible, and I love seeing all these characters. In a way, this is the template on how they should do the future MCU movies, and they did it in Ragnarok as well, which is you don't need a big ensemble of the Avengers. You can just have a couple of them there. Like in this, you've got Captain America, you've got Black Widow, you've got Maria Hill, you've got Falcon, you've got Nick Fury. It works. But then we go to Captain America Civil War. Now this movie had a really difficult job because you had to side with one of them, but at the same time you can't. You have to sort of throughout the entire film think, well, no, hang on, I agree with Cap, that actually makes sense. But no, hang on, Tony Stark, he's made a very good point there, and it somehow manages that. There are definitely parts in this movie where I'm just like, yep, full on Team Cap. Then there are other parts where I'm just like, nah, Team Tony. In terms of just looking at these movies as just a normal trilogy of movies, with this, I think what kind of lets Civil War down is the fact that you may need to see other movies before you see this one. I don't think definitely, but I just think that you can fully appreciate this movie if you have seen all of the other previous MCU movies. Maybe not the Incredible Hulk, just skip that shit. Or even the Thor movies. Also, it does kind of feel like Avengers 2.5. It is most definitely a Captain America movie, but you can't help but feel, considering how many characters are there, that it is just an Avengers movie. But like I say, the story is very personal to Steve and Tony at the same time, so you could argue that it isn't. The motivations for the characters in this is perfectly clear, and I love that. I love seeing these characters clash. I mean, Marvel pretty much had a villains problem, so they just went, fuck it, we'll fight them against each other. The action sequences, particularly the airport scene, oh, it's just nerdgasm. Also, it introduces us to Spider-Man and Black Panther, both of which are really, really fucking awesome. It's such a fanboy movie. I love it. It's great. So the Captain America trilogy, in my opinion, boring start, but the rest of the movies are just phenomenal. However, is the Captain America trilogy your favourite set of movies? Let me know. Then we come to the last set of trilogies that has only recently finished with Infinity War, which is the Avengers. I don't care what anybody says, the first Avengers is a moment in cinematic history that I will just never forget. Spending time and years just waiting for this movie, watching all the pieces go into place. Admittedly, not as smoothly in places, but when you see the end product of the Avengers, regardless of what you think of that movie, it is an incredible feat that they managed to make that and make it good at the same time. Seeing these characters interact with each other, again, is just a nerdgasm. I remember watching it in the cinema just thinking, I can't believe I'm watching this. There's a roller coaster of emotion because I've grown up reading these characters and seeing them in cartoons, and seeing them on the big screen, you just think, fuck. Now the first half an hour is a bit slow. Seeing the Avengers all come together, that is a load of fun. And then obviously there's the big fight at the end where they're just sort of whacking stuff and shooting things, and it is a bit Transformers-esque. But come on, it's fun. You're having a great time watching it. This movie does a great job of not only balancing the characters, but giving them each significant amounts of time and significant moments in the movie. Iron Man has his moments, Hulk has his moments, Thor has his moments. Everybody gets a time to shine in this. Loki is a great, great villain. I mean, considering how good he was in this, I am a bit pissed that they didn't really go down the villain route as much later on. I mean, I still love Loki as he ended up, but still, I love villain Loki. But yeah, this movie was an event, and it's just great. I have such wonderful memories of seeing it for the first time. Then we go to Age of Ultron, which I know is not everybody's cup of tea, but it's not as bad as everybody makes it out to be. I will say though, the main frustration that I have with Age of Ultron is the fact that it is pretty much the exact same film as the first one. They are just fighting a generic army of CGI things. And don't get me wrong, it's cool as you're watching it, but you can't help feel that, I've seen it before. Ultron was a bit of a disappointment, and I'll tell you why. If you go back and you watch the very first trailer for Age of Ultron, watching that, it's like watching a trailer for a fucking horror movie. The tone in that trailer is so dark and creepy, and yet we don't really get that in the final film, and that really is a frustration that I do hold against Age of Ultron. I mean, we get Quicksilver for a bit, we get Scarlet Witch, and we get Vision as well, who are very nice and welcome additions to the team. But Ultron as a villain is a bit boring. I mean, James Spader does his best, but also, this movie definitely gets bogged down with certain moments. I mean, there's bits with Thor where I'm just like, this didn't need to be in the film. But it's definitely a solid movie. It's not bad by any stretch, but it's just not as good. Although I will say the Hulkbuster Hulk fight, nerdgasm again. It's the only word I can use to describe it, but my god was it good. And then we come to Avengers Infinity War. Now this is where the major spoilers come in. I'm not going to try and mention everything that happens in the film because I don't want to ruin it too much. Again, they did the impossible. The amount of characters in this movie. I mean, you've not just got the Avengers, you've got characters that are soon to be Avengers, you've got the Guardians of the Galaxy, you've got an entire fucking country of Wakanda to balance into this film as well. Now this movie is just a spectacle. It really, really is, from start to finish. I mean, seeing these different characters interact with each other, you know, seeing Tony Stark with Doctor Strange, seeing Thor with the Guardians, Scarlet Witch, Captain America and Black Panther in Wakanda, like, these are all just great team-ups that you want to see. The only problem that I have with this movie, and I must admit, is I don't think they get the balances as right as they could have done. There are certain characters in the movie where I genuinely feel like they were barely in it and added nothing to the plot overall. And it's a shame because some of them are major characters. Because when you watch the trailer, you see some of these characters and you think, oh, that's going to be such a sweet moment. And it just isn't, because they don't do much else other than that moment that was clearly meant to be for the trailer. Thanos steals this movie. Like, he is just the best Marvel villain thus far. Although it pisses me off that he takes off his helmet and his armor. Like, he looks so much better with it instead of looking like weird purple Homer Simpson. His motivations, whilst if you really think about them for a while, are quite dumb. But when you're watching it in the movie, you fully believe that what he is doing is the right thing, which is weird. You shouldn't think that when you're watching a villain. One thing that I will say about this movie as well is the fact that the humour lands throughout. Now yes, there are some dodgy jokes here and there, but they're still funny. There are certain moments in the movie where you sort of think, was that the right time to make a joke? But you don't care because it's that funny anyway. Get lost, Squidward. All the characters, they just shine. Their personalities come out, and seeing them clash with each other, you'd think you get bored of it, but you don't. It has to balance so much, and yet for the most part, in terms of the plot and the story, maybe not the characters, it does it really well. The only major issue that I would say about Infinity War, if we're talking about just trilogies on their own, you cannot watch Infinity War if you have not seen any of the previous Marvel movies. I mean, you can, but you won't get a lot of it, and you probably won't care about a lot of it. And to be honest, I'm not going to hold that against the movie too much. The main reason being is because this movie needed to be like this. You can't have this movie explaining who everybody is. You can't have this movie explaining what all the Infinity Stones are. It's basically just like, well, if you haven't caught up, tough. And I love that. I think that's great. And the end is just incredibly emotional. Like, bold, yet emotional. Tom Holland gives the best performance in the entire movie. I'm not even bullshitting, it just is the case. However, Thor has the most badass moment in the movie as well. Like, you know which moment I'm talking about if you've seen it, but my god, is it fucking awesome. Bring me Thanos! I wish I hadn't shaved my beard. I want to be Thor. If someone could, like, make me a hammer that can do all that shit, please do it, and then send it to me at P.O. Box. But yes, it is the end to a very good trilogy of movies. The Avengers is just fantastic and an incredible cinematic experience. You could marvel at it, you might say. Age of Ultron, whilst not as good, still really enjoyable. And Infinity War, if you've seen everything leading up to it, just mind-blowing. I can't wait to see where it's going to go next. However, is the Avengers trilogy your favourite set of movies? Now, in terms of what I think, I'm not going to say, because I don't want to sway anyone. I'd love to hear what other people think. I've obviously put my cases forward. I've given you a rough guide of what I think of these movies. You never know, though. One great movie in a trilogy could lift it up above another entire trilogy. You don't know. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, the Avengers, which of the MCU trilogies is your favourite? If you enjoyed this video, then make sure you leave a like on it. Subscribe for more, because I'll be doing more Marvel content in the near future. Follow me on social media, support me on Patreon if you want to suggest any video idea to me. And if you did any of those things, I would love you more than Thanos loves his glove. But until next time, guys, you take care of yourselves. Goodbye. Ah, that was my foot, Jesus.